Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. Right, so we have a lot to talk about in this exploration guide for quest 7.24. Now I have uploaded 7.1, 2 and 3 guides. Now we're doing the 4. So that means 5 is going to be out tomorrow and 6 is going to be out the day after. As always, we have 6 lanes and 3 bosses. We're going to start with the one that's most fun if you have a Mortal Hulk, but it's also perfectly doable if you do not. So it's the Slumber Flare Particle Protector Size Matters lane. So due to Flare, you can do a lot more damage, but you're going to be degening. That is something to always take in mind. And Slumber basically means that you're going to be finishing pretty much all of the fights within 15 seconds. Now, Particle Protector and Size Matters means that ideally you want to be using extra large champions for most part. So the heroes of this lane, for most people, will be Immortal Hulk, Warlock, Hulkbuster. Those are great options. Or if you have any other hard-hitting extra large champion. But that is not all. Because on top of it all, you can throw heavy attacks with any champion. And as long as you have a champion ability that has extremely potent heavy attack, you can finish these fights very quickly. So for instance, Domino with the full Flame On Trinity can get through these fights fast, which is the name of the game, so that is a viable strategy. Or something that I personally really liked as soon as I heard about it is Apocalypse and Cable, because you can bring in Apocalypse and he's going to last you 1 or 2 fights if you want to stretch it. But after that, you can make Cable a horseman, and since opponents are not gaining power like ever, you can just throw your heavy attacks into oblivion. They're going to get a ton of degens and absolutely melt away. Plus, you have a chance to trigger regen as well. And if you're running Suicide Masteries and he's a horseman, you're going to be regenerating from Suicide Masteries in order to help you offset a bit more damage. So keep in mind that champions with very potent heavy attacks can still be perfectly usable on this lane too, and will let you blitz through it. So it's a very fun lane. I loved it. Absolutely amazing. You can get through it in like 3 minutes with Immortal Hulk, if that. Let's move on to the next one. Superiority, Underdog, Deep Impact. So Underdog means you're looking to fight at a class disadvantage. So if you're going up against Science Champion, you want to use Mystic Champion. If you're going up against Mystic Champion, you're looking to use a Cosmic Champion. Deep Impact basically should give you a lot more block penetration and damage if you shoot specials in a block. However, it didn't really seem to work too well for me, so I just ended up doing this path kind of like more or less in a normal way. Now it has Oscillate and Cosmic Ascendancy, which gives Cosmic and Mystic Champions attack bonus. Other than that, it's just a flat out Oscillate lane. Now you can try to do that whole special attacks in the block thing, but I ended up messing about and getting hit more than it was worth. So yeah, I just ended up playing it normally, using my regular questing champions, stuff like, I don't know, Archangel and Moleman and whoever, and it was fine. It's not the most exciting lane, but it's definitely not overly tricky. And the opponents there are neat, like there's Juggernaut, there is Miles, so ideally you want to have access to slow debuff or something, but yeah, for most part, I don't think this was the greatest node design in general, so it's okay. You can try that whole throw specials and block on purpose thing, but yeah, don't forget, if they're very aggressive when you throw that first of all, on Fury phase, you're not going to be able to throw that special and block easily anyways, because they're super aggressive. In their armor phase, they're going to be taking less damage anyway, so yeah, I just played it personally normally, and that was just about that. Let's move on to the next one. Superiority, Underdog. So again, you're looking to be a class disadvantage. You have Cut Your Losses, where you gain 100% Fury for 15 seconds every time you lose power. And if you have Superiority, then you can stack this Fury. And this lane was very fun. Now, you do have that Burden of Might and Destructive Feedback and Tech Ascendancy. Plus, with that Cut Your Losses thing, for every armor buff, I think you have, you lose less power. So that's fine, but still. The main point of the fight here was to... Sorry, no, it wasn't lose less power. It did something else, but it doesn't really matter. The entire point here is to lose power, so use champions that do not necessarily rely on special attacks, and you're gonna be gaining a ton of Furies. Corvus was very cool for this lane, and I'm sure Ghost is awesome as well, why not? But the key is to just trigger that Dexterity, wait out destructive feedback. Don't really try to strike them much whilst that yellow shield is active. Whilst it's down, just go to town, trigger dex, trigger buffs, lose power, and have a ton of fun, because you can stack up like 6-7 of those furies if you're quick, and then you have like 600% attack increase. This was a very, very fun lane. I did enjoy doing this one. And again, just remember to stay in class disadvantage. So you want to use tech champions against cosmic, and you want to use cosmic champions against mystic champs, and that's it. Right, let's move on to the next one. And it's Mercy. And I'm not a fan of Mercy. The rest of the nodes are not too problematic. So mutagenic acceleration basically gives additional bonuses to tech and mutant champions, which is kind of neat. It's not too bad. You have bubble shield, so you need to be careful with blocking. But the way Mercy works is basically you need to trigger Dexterity a lot, once again. Every time you trigger Dexterity, you get 1 Mercy charge, and then you parry, and all of those Mercy charges get transferred to opponent. Each of them lasts 1.5 seconds, and during that period, you can do your normal damage. And I'm not a big fan of that node, that mechanic. You do get basically damage increase through when Mercy is active, but it's just annoying. For me personally, I just chose to use Archangel and bypassed all of that. So that told me that passive damage bypasses Mercy. So stuff like Void's passive damage should also be quite useful here. Here, Archangel was putting in a ton of work for me. I believe you can use Quake and disable Mercy node altogether as well. And yeah, you can play without the confines of the node, but I'm personally not the biggest fan. And yeah, I, for most part, just brought in double Archangel and did that. When it comes to the opponents, there's nothing overly tricky. It's just the entire node. To me, I really don't like it. So it's basically trigger a whole bunch of dexterities, parry them, and then you can do damage properly. It's just annoying. Yeah, I was not a fan of it at all. Right, let's move on to the next one, Superiority, Underdog. So once again, you want to be at class disadvantage. And then you have Head Rush, where opponent will basically be shrugging off a ton of debuffs due to tenacity node, and eventually you're gonna passively stun them for 1.5 seconds. And they also have stun vulnerability and skill ascendancy. So the entire purpose and idea of this lane is to use champions that debuff a lot, and eventually your opponents are gonna get stunned. You need to inflict 12 debuffs without superiority. With superiority, you need to inflict 6 debuffs. But honestly, again, this is just one of those examples where it's not quite worth the hassle. So my personal recommendation is just treat your opponents more or less as they are debuff immune and be done with it. Alternatively, you can bring Apocalypse or Storm Pyramid X, which will work fantastic here because they cannot shrug off Apocalypse's debuffs. So you can just ignore the entire lane. You can bring in Storm Pyramid X, and you're gonna still place longer passive stuns. You're gonna have a great time. Or you can just bring in something like Ghost and just ghost these fights. Honestly, it's not the best node design. It was interesting to try it out, but it just didn't seem worth it. And also, looking at the opponents, there's no real hard fights. So my personal recommendation is, yeah, Apocalypse, Storm Pyramid X, or just pick your heavy hitters that don't rely on debuff, like Ghost, and just blitz through it. If you don't have Ghost, I don't know, Jacked Corvus would do well as well, because the first fight is Tech Champion, that's an Avenger, so that's 2 charges. Then you have Storm, that's 3 charges, and Corvus with boost and 3 charges is going to blitz through it, and you're going to be just fine. Honestly, it's not that big of a deal. Just, yeah, pretend that the opponent can't be stunned or debuffed, and that's it. Not quite worth messing about with average champion trying to debuff till World's End. And the last lane here is Mixmaster, Light Them Up, which basically makes the entire Mixmaster thing pointless, because as long as they have Shock or Incinerate, they can't evade or auto-block. Then you have Counter Strike, which is kind of like whatever node, you're not really going to use it here. And you have Incinerate and Shock Vulnerability. Now, the most important thing here is pay attention to the wording there. While the defender is incinerated, the attacker's attack rating is increased by 200%. They do not increase the incinerate damage in itself. They do not care for how big the incinerates are. They just care that opponent is incinerated and or shocked. So that means Black Widow Clairvoyant, for instance, is wonderful here because you just drop those tiny incinerates and you have 200% attack increase for the entire fight as soon as you get to incinerate phase. And needless to say, champions like Black Widow Deadly Origins work fantastic here. A Massacre can do great job as well once you get the Bat Ignited, even though that is a slightly bit troublesome. But in general, so long as your champion has access to Incinerate or Shock readily available, you're going to have 200% attack increase. Or if you can get both of them active with... I'm actually thinking, which champion can Incinerate and Shock? Is there anything? Sentinel. Sentinel would be quite interesting to try out. If you drop level 2 and drop a heavy attack, you should have like a 400% attack increase. So Sentinel would be quite interesting for this. But yeah, in general, I did like this lane. It was quite quick. It was quite fun. I liked this one a lot as well. And then we need to talk about the bosses wherever they are hiding. Let me just quickly find the bosses. I found them before. Here we go. So we're going to start the one that can be used and abused the most, which is Man-Thing. Now you have high energy diet, which means energy attacks will do hardly any damage. You have Power Shield and Flare, which can potentially end up with some really cheesy results. Because Flare obviously gives you 300% damage increase, and Power Shield gives you 400% damage increase in special attacks. So those are going to be some juicy specials. Then you have Power Reversal, which basically just means you don't want to trigger power gain buffs. And Man-Thing's specials are unblockable, which is not a big deal because they're not the hardest ones to evade. Now, my personal favorite here definitely was Immortal Hulk. Absolutely destroys this fight because his passive damage from his rage attacks gets by Power Shield, so you do damage all the time anyways, and obviously when you drop special attack, Man-Thing feels it. Alternatively, you can use Quake. Quake plus Flare is going to do fantastic here. You're going to be dealing a ton of damage, and Man-Thing's going to go down very, very quickly as well. But other than that, really, you just need to use a Poison Immune champion, and there's nothing else to this fight. Just bring in any Poison Immune champion, like, I don't know, She-Hulk or Red Hulk or whatever. Red Hulk's technically not Poison Immune, but you guys get the point. And you're not going to have too much problem. Because, yeah, the nodes are what they are. They're not too hard to play around. Flare will eventually take you down, but you should have more than enough juice in you to finish off the fight if you start with full health. So it's a very straightforward boss that can potentially be extremely fun as well. Now we're going to talk about Abomination, and a lot of people have been asking me about this boss because I think a lot of people also don't properly understand what it does. This Meltdown node is effectively a hot potato. You start with a timer on 30 seconds. Whenever you activate a special attack, you put the timer on your opponent for 5 seconds, and then every time whoever activates special attack, you change the potato, so to speak. And if the timer expires, then you take 200% attack damage as degeneration or something like that. Or you basically just take a burst of damage. So the idea is never let the timer expire on you. Now, if you have done Labyrinth of Legends, it's kind of like fairly similar idea to Agent Venom's Incinerate node, where you just don't want the timer to run out on you. Now, there is also Hurt Locker, Kinetic Transference, and Special Attack 1, so there are some things to look out for, but the main idea is you just want to keep an eye out on that timer, so in ideal circumstance, you want to drop a special attack whilst opponent is under a bar power and just stall a bit. So you drop a special attack whilst opponent has no power, and then just do nothing. And then opponent's going to take 200% burst damage. So it's fairly straightforward. Now, on a personal level, I chose to ignore vast majority of these nodes altogether, and I just ended up bringing in Archangel and nuking the guy down. I know it's not an option for everybody. Once again, Quake is a perfectly viable option for this fight, I believe, as well, because you should be able to turn off that node altogether, and then just Quake him down. Or you can bring in, again, She-Hulk, Red Hulk, or pretty much any Poison Immune champion, because that is the main aspect. You can play around this node and have extra damage throughout the fight, so long as you do not die from Immortal Abomination's poisons. As long as you don't take poison damage, you should be good if you know what you're doing. Obviously, be wary of kinetic transference and hurt locker. Other than that, you don't have too much to worry about there. And last boss, we have Nova. Now, Nova has this burnout mechanic, where every time he activates special attack, basically he is increasing his special attack damage by 10%, so that goes up until 100. However, when the defender has 10 or more burnout charges, 10 are removed and the defender is passively power locked for 10 seconds. Whenever the attacker activates dexterity for any hit from the defender's special attacks, the defender gains additional burnout charge. So the idea is to dex no special one, which is not a hard thing to do. It really isn't. And eventually he's going to power lock himself. Just don't get hit. His special attacks are going to hurt, but if you dex his special ones, you're going to be good. Additional nodes, we have Time to Strike, which does very little. We have Supercharge that can give him a power gain buff, and Fury, which is very little. So in general, it's just like a Nova that has a beefed up damage and occasional power gain. You can combat it with Quake. Quake can work really well here as well, because there's nothing saying you can't reduce his ability accuracy. And with Quake, you can switch off pretty much the entire fight and make it a regular Nova fight. Besides that, you can bring in Magneto, which should absolutely nuke this guy down with 1 level 3, which in fact is the way I handled the fight. On top of that, Dr. Doom obviously should have pretty much a field day as well, thanks to the Supercharge, which is a power gain buff that you can steal, and then just power control and buff control Nova, and have your fun without ever letting him really use special attacks. So for most part, it is slightly more complicated Nova fight, which is alright. You know, it's not the hardest thing, it's not the easiest thing. Whatever you typically use to counter Nova should pretty much work here as well. Just keep in mind that it's very important that you don't push Nova to level 2s, because if you can't evade that one, it's going to hurt like hell on block. And the entire purpose of this burnout node is to force you to dex his level 1 hits. That's it. The rest of it is kind of going to take care of itself. And that is it for 7.24. Now, I'm not going to keep you guys any longer, because we will have a ton of news information later on today, I believe. So that is going to be quite interesting to see. Now, I'm not in CCP, so I don't have early access, but word on street is that we're going to get the buff information and the update guide, basically, for the next month. So let's take a look at what happens then. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the video, find it helpful, and I'm going to catch you guys soon. See ya. Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the